Now, over the next few minutes, I want to show you some fragments of real animal bones that are more than 3,000 years old. And what's written on them might surprise you. What you're looking at here is called a scapula. It's a shoulder blade from an animal like a deer. But this isn't any ordinary bone. This bone was used by an ancient shaman as a writing surface. Now, what's so incredible about this is that the shaman carved into the bone over 3,000 years ago, and he recorded things that happened during his lifetime. Now, the thing that's so crazy about this is that one of the lines on this bone reads, "Don't let your bow snap." In English, this is literally a warning to the shaman, so that while he's hunting, while he's out there trying to hunt deer, that his bow doesn't snap. That is crazy. How many of us can relate to that? We go out hunting and we don't want our bows to snap. The shaman even went further. Talked about a rabbit that ran away. He talked about how he couldn't hit it with his arrow. He said that he saw the blood of a deer and how happy he was to see that. And he also wrote down how he missed the deer and how it ran away. So it's almost like we're rereading a diary entry of this shaman, and we re-seeing all of these stories and these details about his life. It's incredibly personal and intimate, yet it's 3,000 years old. Now, the question I want to pose is this. Why would a shaman, a hunter, someone who's out in the wild, take the time to write down such mundane tasks and such mundane thoughts and warnings? Why would he inscribe onto a piece of bone something as silly as "do" and "let your bow snap"? The reason is because these little everyday occurrences mattered to him. And when he carved these inscriptions onto bone, he made them matter to us as well. Now, the truth is, we can learn so much from these bones, more than just the big events that happened 3,000 years ago. When we look at these bones, we see the lives of ordinary people, and we can connect with them on a deeply human level. Here's another bone. This one comes from a sheep. And this one is really interesting because it records a drought. It says that 40 days without rain is what caused the crops to fail. And it seems like the ancient people were quite concerned about the weather and the rainfall. They wanted to understand the patterns, and they wanted to know when it was going to rain again. But I can relate to this, because when I travel around the world, I meet people who say that it hasn't rained in months, and their crops are dying. Or I meet people who say it's been raining for weeks, and their crops are also dying. The truth is, no matter where we live, whether it's 3,000 years ago or today, we depend on the weather. And we're always looking up to the sky and wondering, please God, just give us enough rain so our crops don't fail. Another bone that I have here is extremely interesting. It comes from the femur, the thigh bone of a human. And this bone was used by a doctor, by a healer, and he recorded a case study of a patient who had a toothache. Now, this bone says the king has a toothache. Can you imagine a king having a toothache? Sometimes the most powerful people in the world think they're invincible. They think they're above having to deal with the same problems that you and I deal with. But this bone tells us that kings get toothaches too. I have toothaches. You probably have had toothaches. Kings have toothaches. It's amazing. Because when we look at these bones, we realize that we're all the same. We're all human beings. We all have hopes, dreams, and fears. And these bones remind us of that. When you find bones like this, sometimes you feel like you're uncovering the secrets of the past. It's almost like these bones are whispering stories to us across the ages. And if we listen carefully, they can teach us so much about the world and about ourselves. Here's a bone that was carved by a shaman. And this shaman kept track of his experiences while he was traveling. And this bone says, "Beware the dog." How many of us have seen signs like this? Sometimes when we travel, we come across places where there's a sign saying, "Beware of dog," right? You don't want to get bitten by a dog. And this shaman was reminding himself to be careful. I love bones like this because they remind us that we're all the same. No matter where we live or what time period we live in, we all have to deal with the same things. We all have to deal with dogs that might bite us. The shaman didn't only talk about dogs. He also talked about how he wanted to live a good life. He wanted to have lots of money. He wanted to be successful. And he even talked about how he wanted to help other people. One of the things that I love about this bone is that it's showing us that this shaman was imperfect. He had flaws. He made mistakes. But he was still a good person who tried his best to help others. I think that's an important lesson for us to remember. There are so many different kinds of bones that can tell us stories about the past. There are long bones like this one from a leg. There are flat bones like shoulder blades. And each one can tell us something unique about the people who lived thousands of years ago. For example, this bone has marks on it that show us the joints where muscles and tendons attached. And that helps us understand how this ancient person moved and how they interacted with their environment. Some bones are smooth and polished from being handled so much that they almost feel like a part of the family. Like this bone has indentations where fingers would grip it, and that makes me wonder who held it and why. Who picked it up and examined it so closely? Was it a scientist or maybe a curious kid? And then there are bones that are broken or have strange shapes, like this one with a hole punched through it. Each scratch and nick tells a story of its own. It's like reading a map with the language of the past. One thing that really fascinates me about these bones is how they make us feel connected to the past. They're physical objects that once belonged to real people who lived, loved, and died. They bring history to life in a way that textbooks or museums just can't match. Holding this bone feels like touching the very essence of someone who lived thousands of years ago. It makes me wonder what their life was like, what they saw and felt. It's a humbling experience that reminds me of how much the world has changed and how much it's stayed the same. But it's not just about the past. These bones also teach us about ourselves. By studying them, we learn about human evolution and how our ancestors adapted to their environments. We also learn about early humans' beliefs and cultures by deciphering the symbols and markings left behind on bones. These bones are a window into a world we can't see or hear directly. They're a silent witness to the evolution of our species. And I think that's really incredible. So the next time you come across a bone, take a moment to appreciate its story. It might be a piece of someone's life that's been waiting thousands of years to be discovered. It could be the key to understanding our past, or simply a reminder that we all connected in ways we never imagined. I hope that this video gave you some insight into the lives of the people who lived thousands of years ago. If you found this video fascinating, please consider subscribing to my channel. Thanks for watching. Our newest member of the team is Dr. Joanna Bruick, an expert in ancient Chinese archaeology and a specialist in the Shang Dynasty. She'll help us read the cracks in the bones and discover what they have to say about China's first great dynasty. So let us see what secrets the bones hold and find out how much longer this dynasty will last. These are real human bones. They come from elite members of the Shang Dynasty who lived between 1600 and 1046 BC. But how did their bones get here? Well, the Shang had a peculiar habit of burying their elite with ritual meals, along with things like precious metals, jade, and pottery. Sometimes they buried chariots and weapons so their favorite warriors would be ready for battle in the afterlife. But it wasn't enough to simply enter them. The Shang believed that after death, the soul would wander the earth. So they needed to keep the body intact and prevent it from decaying. That's why they turned to a technique known as bone wrapping, which involved wrapping the deceased person's bones in cloth and then placing them in a coffin. This preserved the remains and allowed the Shang to move the coffins around without damaging the bones. This practice has been called inhumation, and it was common throughout China for over 2 millennia. It's one of the reasons we have such good quality Shang Dynasty remains today. But wait a minute. If these are real human bones, where are the bodies? Well, after thousands of years, they aren't exactly bodies anymore. The tissue decays, leaving behind only the skeleton, and that's what we call bones. Now, you might be wondering why they're in the shape of an hourglass. Well, during the excavation, archaeologists carefully removed the outer layer of soil until they reached the coffin. Then they lifted the lid to check the condition of the remains inside. The Shang Dynasty lived so long ago that their coffins had mostly decayed, leaving just the bones. So archaeologists carefully took the bones out, put them in boxes, and sent them to our lab. So how do we learn about the lives of these people? We have to understand the history of what happened to them after death. After the body decays, leaving behind a skeleton, it often gets disturbed by animals or water erosion. Over time, these forces can break the bones into many pieces. When archaeologists find these fragments, they try to piece them together like a giant jigsaw puzzle. Once the bones are complete, they can start to answer questions about who the person was when they were alive. For example, we know this individual died a violent death. That's because their skull has an injury that caused part of their brain to collapse into their nasal cavity. But there's more to bones than just the story of someone's life and death. Bones preserve evidence of a person's entire life. When they are still growing, bones show signs of illnesses and injuries that occurred before death. When they are adults, their bones show signs of physical stress, like the arthritis in the spine of this individual. By studying the bones, we can identify exactly who they were, including their age, gender, and even their diet. Now, if all this sounds familiar, it could be because we've done it before with our Egyptian mummies. But there is one key difference. Unlike the Egyptians, the Shang didn't mummify their dead. Mummification was expensive and time-consuming, and not everyone could afford the process. In fact, most people in ancient China were buried in shallow pits with simple grave goods. Only the most important members of society received elaborate burials, like this person. Their burial contained dozens of ritual vessels, indicating that they had high status. But it wasn't just about their social rank. Their luxurious burial shows that they were well-liked by their community. A lavish tomb may suggest that the deceased person was rich and powerful, but it also means that other people wanted to give them gifts. But what about the story written on their bones? The Shang believed that after death the soul continued to exist, interacting with the living world, to communicate with their ancestors. The Shang performed rituals where they poured a liquid like wine onto the ground and asked the spirits to accept it as an offering. Then they waited for a response, watching for signs like smoke, wind, or fire to appear. Sometimes they got direct answers through oracles. An oracle was a person who interpreted signs and omens. They were like priests or mediums who spoke with the gods and relayed their messages. Oracles could deliver prophecies, divine advice, or warnings of disaster. And the Shang rulers relied on them to stay in the gods' good graces. That's why oracles were often buried alongside important rulers, so they could watch over them in the afterlife. Oracles usually got their powers from one of two sources: dreams or animal bones. Thousands of years ago, people noticed that heating animal bones made them crack. They also noticed that the cracks looked like certain shapes, and those shapes could be interpreted as messages from the gods. It's called osteomancy. It's the art of fortune-telling with bones. When Shang Dynasty, oracles wanted to get a message from the gods, they would take turtle shells, or the leg bones of oxen or sheep, heat them over a fire until they cracked, then interpret the message based on the direction and shape of the cracks. It was like flipping a coin or drawing cards, except the stakes were much higher. The success of a military campaign or the fate of an entire dynasty could depend on the accuracy of the oracle's interpretation. The Shang kept track of these divinations, recording the date of the ritual and the message the god delivered. They wrote these records on the bones themselves, using a brush dipped in melted grease. And that's how we deciphered the secret language of bones. The messages were brief, consisting of keywords that described a single idea, like the number of days in a ritual, whether the god approved or disapproved of a plan, or instructions for a future action. Often these inscriptions were optimistic, recording successful rituals and military victories. But they also recorded failures, showing the dark side of life in the Shang Dynasty. Some bones describe failed rituals, which meant the gods weren't happy with the Shang rulers. Others speak of famines, and some mention discontent among the people. These cold, unsettling inscriptions serve as reminders that, while humans can ask for blessings, the future is never certain. The cracks in the bones were not always messages of triumph. They were sometimes warnings of disaster. Some bones even foretold the fall of the dynasty, the eventual decline of the Shang. Each crack was a harbinger of doom. Writing, it turns out, was not only a way to record victories, but also to document the inevitable decline. That's why it's so important to study these bones. They are tangible links to the past, allowing us to explore the history of ancient China without the bias of propaganda or the hagiographies of winners. Archaeology isn't just about finding treasure, it's about uncovering the stories of ordinary people. When we dig at archaeological sites, we aren't just looking for statues or jewelry. We want to understand daily life in every era. Archaeology teaches us to think deeply about humanity and our place in history. So when you look at these bones, don't just see artifacts. See the lives they represent. Every scratch and crack is a reminder of the countless stories that shaped our world. Thousands of years ago, a young man was struck by a spear during a battle. As he lay dying, he clutched a bone in his hand, perhaps from a bird or an animal, and etched lines onto it. He didn't know it at the time, but this would be one of the earliest examples of writing ever recorded by mankind. Today, those bones are being analyzed by researchers who have discovered that the markings on them tell the story of life during a period of human history that very few people know about. Writing often seems like a mundane part of our everyday lives. We write notes, we send texts, we read books, and we watch videos. But when we look at these bones, we are not just seeing a form of writing. We are seeing life itself, with all its hopes, fears, triumphs, and failures. The cracks in the bones represent the eternal struggle of humanity, to survive, to conquer, and to record our stories. These bones are not just remnants of an ancient civilization, they are memories that refuse to die. When archaeologist Michael Petraglia from the University of Queensland first saw the bones, he knew they were special. The bones had been discovered in a cave in southeastern France, and they date back to between 36,000 and 42,000 years ago. At first glance, they looked like nothing more than fragments of animal bones that had been gnawed on by mice. But upon closer inspection, Petraglia realized that the lines etched into the bones were deliberate. What's even more incredible is that there are over 200 of these marked bones from more than 50 different species of animals. This suggests that the practice of bone engraving was widespread, and that these bones were not just the work of a single individual. Graved bones have been found all over the world, from Africa to Europe to North America, and they have revealed that humans have been recording their experiences on bones for tens of thousands of years. The oldest pieces of writing ever discovered, the Ashango bone, was found in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and dates back to between 20,000 and 50,000 years ago. It is a baboon femur that has notches carved into it in a pattern that resembles tally marks. Researchers believe that the bone was used as a counting tool, and that it may have been used to keep track of time or to record the number of people in a group. In Europe, the earliest evidence of writing comes from the Spanish site of Maltravieso, where archaeologists have found bone fragments with engravings that date back to around 35,000 years ago. These engravings include lines, dots, and other markings that researchers believe may represent abstract symbols. Some researchers have suggested that these symbols may have had a religious or spiritual significance, while others believe they may have been used as a form of personal identification. One of the most famous examples of early bone writing comes from a site in Germany known as Guyanklistorl. In 1979, archaeologist Konrad Spindler discovered a collection of animal bones that had been engraved with lines, dots, and other markings. Some of the bones also had small holes drilled into them, which created a sort of musical instrument. Researchers believe that these bones were used in a variety of ways, including as tools, weapons, and ceremonial objects. In North America, the oldest pieces of bone writing come from the Clovis culture, which flourished around 13,000 years ago. The Clovis culture is named after the type site of Clovis, New Mexico, where archaeologists have found a number of distinctive fluted spear points. These spear points are some of the most iconic artifacts of the ancient world, and they are considered to be some of the finest examples of stone tool technology. But the Clovis people were not just skilled hunters, they were also artists and thinkers. They created beautiful bone tools and ornaments that show a sophisticated understanding of the natural world. So what does it all mean? What can we learn from these ancient pieces of writing? One of the most important things to note is that bone writing predates pottery and other forms of writing by thousands of years. This suggests that humans have been recording their experiences on bone since the earliest days of our species. It also shows that humans have been using language and symbols long before we developed agriculture or settled lifestyles. Another important thing to note is that bone writing was practiced all over the world. This suggests that it was a universal human impulse to record our thoughts and experiences. It also shows that humans have been thinking about abstract concepts such as time, space, and the universe since the dawn of our species. Finally, we should note that bone writing is still with us today. We write on bones all the time without realizing it. For example, when we get a tattoo, we are essentially writing on our own bones. Tattoos are one of the oldest forms of body modification, and they have been found on mummies dating back thousands of years. Tattoos were used for a variety of purposes, including as a form of decoration, as a symbol of group membership, and as a way of recording significant life events. Tattoos are typically done by puncturing the skin and then inserting a pigment into the dermis, the second layer of the skin. This causes inflammation, which is a natural response of the body to injury. The body then recognizes the pigment as a foreign substance and tries to break it down and remove it. However, if the pigment is strong enough, it can remain in the dermis for many years, even decades. Bone writing is an ancient practice that has been lost to the sands of time. Only a few pieces of bone from tens of thousands of years ago have survived, but they provide us with a window into the minds of our ancestors. They show us that humans have been thinking about abstract concepts such as time, space, and the universe since the dawn of our species. And they show us that humans have always had a need to record our experiences and share them with others. The next time you pick up a piece of bone, whether it's from an animal you ate or from a piece of furniture, take a moment to appreciate the history of bone writing. Appreciate the fact that humans have been writing on bones for tens of thousands of years and that this practice has shaped the course of human history. Appreciate the fact that bone writing is still with us today in the form of tattoos and other body modifications. And appreciate the fact that bone writing is a testament to the ingenuity and creativity of the human species. The power of writing, born from the humble cracks in bones, has endured through the ages, carrying the voices of the past into the present. These bones, though ancient, continue to speak to us across millennia. They are the link between the people of the past and our world today, reminding us that writing is a timeless legacy that connects us all. As we continue to explore the caves of southern France and other sites around the world, we are sure to uncover more pieces of bone writing that will shed new light on the history of our species. Who knows what other secrets these ancient bones are hiding? Perhaps they hold the key to unlocking the mysteries of human evolution, or maybe they can tell us more about the ancient civilizations that came before us. Whatever the case may be, one thing is for sure: these bones are a reminder that the past is never really past. It's always with us, in the form of physical objects that we can hold in our hands and study. It's also with us in the form of stories that have been passed down through generations, and in the form of memories that live on in our minds. So the next time you see a piece of bone, take a moment to appreciate the history that it holds. Appreciate the fact that it was once part of a living creature, and that it may have played a role in the evolution of our species. Appreciate the fact that it may hold clues to the mysteries of the past, and appreciate the fact that it is a reminder that the past is never really past. It's always with us. So what do you think? What other theories do you have about the bones? Feel free to leave a comment below with your thoughts, suggestions, or questions, and we may feature them in a future episode. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, be sure to check out the series in the description or click the link in the info card. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching. These are the earliest books ever found, inscribed on mysterious bones from an ancient civilization. They reveal the secrets of the lost Shang Dynasty. It all began in 1899 when a well digger stumbled upon a peculiar sight. Shards of animal bones with odd markings lying in the dirt near the village of Yanqi. Little did he know that what looked like mere fragments of discarded bones to his untrained eye were actually the first pages of a historical epic. The discovery of these oracular bones marked a turning point in our understanding of early Chinese civilization. It was as if someone had taken a chisel and painstakingly carved stories of a forgotten era onto these humble remains. But the true depth of this find was not immediately apparent. The Shang Dynasty, a chapter of Chinese history spanning from around 1600 to 1046 BC, had long been shrouded in mystery. Ancient texts spoke of its grandeur, yet tangible evidence of its existence seemed elusive. Then came the oracular bones, each fragment whispering tales of a bygone age. The inscriptions on these bones aren't just etchings, they're messages from the past. They are questions posed to the gods, seeking guidance on everything from agricultural forecasts to military tactics. And the answers? Oh, the answers are written alongside. This practice is called bone oracle, a form of divination where animal bones were used to communicate with the divine. The process was both elaborate and intimate. The bones, primarily from oxen, sheep, and occasionally tortoise shells, were carefully cracked open, and the resulting fissures were interpreted as signs from the gods. This practice was not a casual affair. It was an integral part of the Shang king's decision-making process. Every significant choice, from the mundane to the life-altering, was preceded by a consultation with the oracle bones. Military campaigns, marriages, even the planting of crops. Nothing was too small or too momentous to escape the scrutiny of the divine. But why? Why was the Shang Dynasty so dependent on these brittle whispers from the afterlife? The answer lies in the nature of their world. The Shang kings ruled over a realm where the boundaries between the earthly and the spiritual were incredibly thin. Their worldview was not one of separation, but of interconnectedness. The natural world was alive with spirits. Rivers flowed with the breath of ancestors, mountains echoed with divine voices, and the rustling leaves carried messages from the gods. In this world, every decision carried an element of risk, every harvest a prayer, every battle a plea for mercy. So the Shang kings turned to the oracular bones, seeking not just guidance, but validation. They wanted to ensure that their every step was in harmony with the will of the heavens. This profound connection to the spiritual realm is one of the many aspects of Shang culture that these oracular bones illuminate. Deciphering these ancient messages was no easy feat. The inscriptions, often cryptic and terse, were not your typical narrative. They were fragmented glimpses into a way of life, a civilization that had flourished nearly 3 millennia ago. The task of translation fell to dedicated scholars who spent years poring over these bones, trying to piece together the language, customs, and beliefs of a lost world. Their work was meticulous, painstaking, often frustrating. But with each new decipherment, the Shang Dynasty came to life a little more vividly. They painstakingly cleaned and examined the bones, trying to make sense of the lines and patterns etched into them. With each inscription, they were filling in the gaps of history, creating a portrait of a civilization that had previously existed only in legends. What they found was not just a record of religious practices, but a glimpse into the very essence of the Shang kingship. These rulers were not aloof deities, but active participants in the lives of their people. They consulted the oracles on behalf of their subjects, offering guidance and solace. The oracular bones thus became a link between the divine and the mortal, making the Shang Dynasty a truly unique chapter in human history. It's as if the Shang kings saw themselves as conduits of the divine will, shaping their earthly realm according to the heavenly mandate. This concept of the mandate of heaven was a revolutionary idea for its time, setting the stage for future Chinese dynasties and leaving an indelible mark on Chinese philosophy and governance. The influence of these oracular bones extends far beyond the realm of history. They played a pivotal role in shaping our understanding of ancient Chinese society, its beliefs, and its way of life. They are a testament to the ingenuity and resourcefulness of early humans, demonstrating how even the humblest of materials can become vessels of profound knowledge. Each crack, each fracture, telling a story, each indentation holding a secret. As we continue to decipher these ancient messages, we're not just uncovering historical facts. We're connecting with the human experience, realizing that beneath the layers of time, we are all linked by the same hopes, fears, and aspirations. This discovery not only revolutionized our understanding of the Shang Dynasty, but also provided a crucial piece of the puzzle of early Chinese civilization. It was as if the bones themselves were reaching out across the chasm of time, eager to share their secrets. But they didn't just hold historical treasures, they also contained linguistic gold. The inscriptions on these bones represent some of the earliest examples of the Chinese language in existence. Deciphering this ancient script has allowed historians and linguists to trace the evolution of language, shedding light on the origins of one of the world's most widely spoken languages. It's as if the Shang people, through their intimate conversations with the gods, unwittingly left behind a linguistic legacy for future generations to marvel at. The impact of this discovery was so profound that it led to a surge of interest in archaeology and historical research in China. It inspired a generation of explorers and scholars to delve deeper into the country's rich past, uncovering more archaeological sites and unearthing more artifacts that have enriched our understanding of Chinese history. The Shang Dynasty, once a civilization whispered about in myths and legends, now stands as a monumental chapter in Chinese history, all thanks to the oracular bones. The oracular bones are not just relics of the past. They are living testimonies to the human spirit, to our unquenchable thirst for knowledge, and our eternal dialogue with the cosmos. They remind us that every crack in the earth holds a story, every whisper of the wind carries a message, and every artifact has a tale to tell. As we continue to explore these ancient fragments, we're not just learning about the Shang Dynasty, we're understanding ourselves better. We're seeing our own reflection in the hopes, dreams, and beliefs of a civilization that thrived centuries ago. The oracular bones, with their cryptic messages and faded etchings, have become a bridge across the ages, connecting us to the vibrant world of the Shang Dynasty. They've allowed us to peer into the mind of a civilization that once roamed the land, giving voice to the voiceless and breathing life into a history that might have otherwise remained a distant echo. Imagine standing in the hushed halls of a museum, gazing at these very bones. The weight of history would settle upon you, the realization that these fragments were once the lifeline of a great dynasty. You'd feel a sense of awe, perhaps even reverence for the civilization that created them. And in the quiet of your own reflection, you'd ponder the mysteries of a world so different from our own, yet so deeply human. That's the power of the oracular bones, not just as historical artifacts, but as windows to the soul of a bygone era. And then there's the art, the magnificent artwork adorning the bronze vessels. It's a visual feast, a celebration of a civilization at the peak of its creativity. Each vessel is a masterpiece, intricately designed with motifs that speak of a rich cultural heritage. The artistry is not just aesthetically pleasing. It's a testament to the skill and craftsmanship of the Shang artisans. These bronze vessels were not just tools for rituals. They were works of art, designed to inspire, to elevate, and to endure. But the significance of the bronzes goes beyond their aesthetic appeal. They're repositories of knowledge, each design element holding a layer of meaning, a symbol, a story. They provide insights into the Shang worldview, their beliefs, their values, and their relationship with the world around them. When you gaze at these ancient masterpieces, you're not just appreciating art, you're engaging with a culture, understanding a way of life that flourished centuries ago. The bronzes come alive, whispering tales of a glorious past and inviting you to become a part of that legacy. And let's not forget the ritual vessels. These are not just beautiful objects. They're vessels of tradition, each one playing a part in a larger drama, a drama of faith, of hope, and of communion with the divine. The rituals surrounding these vessels give us a glimpse into the heart and soul of the Shang Dynasty. They reveal a society deeply connected to its spiritual roots. A society where every action was imbued with meaning and every object held a sacred purpose. The ritual vessels were not merely used in ceremonies. They were integral to the ceremonies, embodying the very essence of the rituals they were meant to serve. Now, as you stand before these ancient vessels, you can almost hear the echoes of chanting, feel the energy of 1,000 rituals performed. You're transported to a world where the boundaries between the material and the spiritual were beautifully blurred. The Shang Dynasty's legacy lives on in these bronze masterpieces. They stand as silent witnesses to a glorious past, each vessel holding a universe of meaning and beauty. They're not just artifacts, they're ambassadors of a civilization that left an indelible mark on history. There is perhaps nothing more intriguing than peering into the annals of history and discovering how our ancestors, the ancients, sought to comprehend the enigmatic realm of fate. One such fascinating method was the practice of reading the entrails of animals, particularly the study of a particular type of animal shoulder blade known as the scapula. It was believed that within these bones lay hidden messages from the gods themselves, offering insights into the mysteries of fortune-telling. But what exactly were these bones, and how did the ancient Chinese use them? Well, let's find out. Archaeologists have discovered over 100,000 tortoise shells and more than 20,000 pieces of scapula from the Shang and Zhou dynasties. These materials were extensively utilized as oracular bones. However, the most famous ones are undoubtedly the oracle bones found at Yingsu, the former capital of the Shang dynasty. From these bones, we can learn about the religious beliefs of the Shang people and glimpse the remarkable insights they held about the world around them. One of the most intriguing aspects of the oracular bones is the process through which they were employed by the Shang people. The process began with the preparation of the bone itself. A piece of scapula or a turtle shell was selected and carefully cleaned before being placed in a designated area called the divinatory room. Here, a small fire would be lit and incense or burnt animal fat would be placed on top of the bone. Then, while focusing on a particular question or seeking guidance on an important decision, The priest would strike the bone with a wooden hammer until it cracked. The nature and location of the cracks that appeared on the bone were then carefully examined. Each crack was believed to hold a message from the gods. The priest's task was to interpret these signs and provide guidance to the king. This method of divination was not only used for personal matters, but also for major decisions affecting the entire kingdom, such as going to war or making alliances. By consulting the oracle bones, the king could supposedly gain insight into the outcome of potential actions and make informed decisions based on the will of the gods. The Shang Dynasty, which lasted from 1600 BC to 1046 BC, holds a significant place in Chinese history. It was during this era that the practice of reading the oracular bones reached its peak. The Shang kings, considered the intermediaries between the divine and human realms, relied heavily on these divine messages to guide their decisions. The oracle bones were not just a tool for divination. They were a means to legitimize their rule and shape the destiny of their kingdom. Every crack on the bone, every inscription was a directive from the gods, influencing everything from war strategies to agricultural policies to succession matters. It was a time when the boundaries between religion and politics were blurred, and the power to read the signs of fate was the ultimate authority. The process of deciphering the oracular bones was highly ritualized and held immense importance in Shang society. Only the king and high priest were permitted to enter the divinatory room where the bones were consulted. As the king was believed to be the intermediary between the gods and humans, he was directly involved in the process, personally breaking the bones and observing the cracks. This intimate connection between the king and the divine gave him a sense of legitimacy and authority. It was through these bones that the king received guidance, not only on matters of state, but also for his own personal life. The priests, on the other hand, played a crucial role in interpreting the signs and communicating them to the king. They were the experts in the rituals and traditions. Surrounding the oracular bones and their knowledge was vital in obtaining a clear message from the gods. The secrecy and exclusivity surrounding this practice added to its mystique, making it a powerful tool for maintaining control and shaping the narrative of the divine will. Now, let's shift our focus to the archaeological findings at Yinsu, the former capital of the Shang Dynasty. This site has yielded some of the most significant discoveries related to the oracular bones, providing us with a deeper understanding of their usage and cultural context. At Yinsu, archaeologists have uncovered vast quantities of tortoise shells and scapula that bear the marks of divination. These bones, many bearing inscriptions, offer a tangible connection to the religious practices of the Shang people. What makes the oracle bones from Yinsu particularly unique is the presence of inscriptions, which are believed to be the earliest known examples of Chinese writing. These inscriptions were made by carving or puncturing patterns into the bone before or after the divinatory process. The patterns often depict various symbols, including animal figures, geometric shapes, and abstract markings. These symbols, while open to interpretation, are thought to represent different elements, such as the four directions, celestial bodies, or natural phenomena. The presence of these inscriptions on the oracle bones suggests a sophisticated system of record-keeping and communication. It indicates that the Shang people recognized the importance of documenting these divinatory practices, possibly to preserve records of past consultations or to serve as a reference for future interpretations. This practice also highlights the close relationship between writing and power during the Shang Dynasty. The ability to read and interpret these cracks was reserved for the elite class, and the knowledge of writing allowed them to control and transmit this power effectively. While the oracle bones provide valuable insights into the religious and political practices of the Shang Dynasty, they also raise several questions and debates among historians and archaeologists. One of the key challenges in studying these bones is the inherent ambiguity of the signs and symbols they bear. The interpretation of cracks and patterns is often subjective, and different scholars may draw different conclusions from the same bone. This lack of objectivity has led to various debates and controversies regarding the accuracy and reliability of divination practices. Furthermore, the scarcity of written records from the Shang Dynasty makes it difficult to separate fact from myth. Much of what we know about their culture and beliefs comes from archaeological evidence and the limited number of texts that survived, leaving a significant gap in our understanding. Another fascinating aspect of the oracular bones is their connection to the broader cultural context of the Shang Dynasty. These bones provide a window into a society deeply influenced by religious beliefs and the desire to understand the will of the gods. They reflect a time when kingship was intertwined with divinity and the power to interpret signs was highly revered. By examining the rituals, practices, and symbolism associated with the oracular bones, we gain a deeper appreciation for the cultural values and worldview of the Shang people. The oracular bones of the Shang Dynasty stand as both a mysterious and captivating testament to the human quest for understanding the mysteries of fate. They offer a glimpse into a world where kings consulted with the gods through cracks in bones, and where the ability to read these signs held immense power. While the ambiguity and subjectivity surrounding their interpretation continued to spark debate, these bones provide an invaluable window into the religious beliefs, cultural practices, and political dynamics of ancient China. As we continue to explore these fascinating artifacts, we unravel the rich tapestry of history and uncover the profound impact they had on the course of Chinese civilization. All right, folks, that's all for today. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. But if you want to see more videos like this, click subscribe and never miss an upload. The story of the earliest writing, the oracular bones, is an amazing one. These bones, with their mysterious cracks and etchings, are like whispers from a forgotten past. They've taught us so much about the Shang Dynasty and those who came before. Here's the thing. These bones, with their limited space and casual style of inscribing, they weren't the end of the story. As time moved on, writing didn't just stay as it was. It evolved. It changed. And today, we're going to explore how this happened right after the Shang Dynasty. After the Shang, a new dynasty rose, the Zhou. And with them, there came a new way of recording their world. You see the oracle bones? They were great for quick casual notes, but they had limitations. The cracks, they could only hold so much, and erasing them, well, that wasn't an option. So as the Shang and then the Zhou started dealing with more complex stuff, managing bigger kingdoms and keeping track of longer, more detailed stories, they needed something different, something more permanent, something like this. These are the famous bronze inscriptions of the Zhou dynasty, a kingdom that lasted for 1,000 years, longer than any other in Chinese history. Now, unlike the oracle bones, which had their characters just casually etched into the bone, these inscriptions, they're carved onto bronze vessels and weapons. This might seem like a small detail, but it's really not. The process of casting bronze was complicated, involving molds, high temperatures, and a lot of skill. So when you take the time to carve characters into a bronze vessel, you're not just making a record, you're making a statement. You're saying, this is important, this is lasting. These bronze inscriptions, they're found all over the place, on ritual vessels, weapons, even chariot fittings. And what's written on them? Well, that's a mix of everything. There are records of important events, lists of sacrifices, even stories of battles and conquests. There's also personal names, family histories, and even poems. One of the most famous examples is the Yingsu King's Ding, a large bronze vessel inscribed with the exploits of King Wu of Zhou, who overthrew the Shang Dynasty and established his own. Now, reading these inscriptions isn't easy. We're talking about a time before punctuation, when the language was a lot different and the characters were still evolving. But slowly, as more and more have been discovered and studied, we've been able to piece together the stories they tell. Here's one example, a smaller vessel with a simpler inscription, but one that's pretty representative of how these inscriptions worked. It says this vessel was made to commemorate a great victory in battle. The king's army, led by the general, defeated the enemy at the river Yi. The slain enemy king is listed in the text, along with the number of chariots and troops lost on both sides. The inscription ends with a prayer for the continued prosperity of the kingdom. Now, if you look closely at the characters, you can see that they're not exactly the same as the ones we use today. They're more stylized, almost like a form of ancient calligraphy. But you can definitely see the roots of our modern characters in here. The bronze inscriptions, they represent a big step forward in the evolution of writing. They show us that the people of the Zhou dynasty were not just chroniclers, they were artists, they were thinkers. They had a need to express themselves, to communicate complex ideas, and to leave a lasting legacy. So next time you see one of these inscriptions, remember you're looking at more than just ancient text. You're looking at a work of art, a symbol of power, and a signifier of permanence. In these vessels and weapons, the past speaks to us in the language of bronze and script, reminding us of the rich tapestry of human expression that has come down to us through the ages. Thanks for joining me on this journey through time. If you've liked this episode, do not forget to subscribe, and join me next time as we continue to explore the amazing history of writing. Until then, stay curious and keep writing. I'm going to start this episode with a little quiz. So what do these two artifacts have in common? Well, aside from both being super old and super cool, they are both examples of early Chinese writing. This is an oracular bone dating back to around 1600 BC. And this is a piece of bronze inscribed with archaic Chinese script also dating back to around 1600 BC. The thing is, if I handed these artifacts over to an expert in ancient Chinese history, they could probably tell you a lot about the bronze, but would be pretty stumped by the bone. That's because until very recently, scholars assumed that this was an example of Shang Dynasty script, a writing system so poorly understood that it was considered more of an indeciphered proto-writing than an actual script. In other words, we didn't even know if this was a genuine example of early Chinese writing, or just some random dude's attempt to copy ancient Chinese writing. However, recent research has shown that these early oracular bones are actually an entirely distinct writing system that was developed independently of Shang Dynasty script, and that it was in use at least 300 years before the Shang even took power. Not only that, but we now have evidence that this script continued to be used alongside Shang Dynasty script throughout the Shang and Zhou dynasties, well into the 8th century BC. So why do I care about this obscure ancient writing system? Well, as it turns out, these oracular bones may help us better understand this guy. You see, these pieces of bone come from a site called Yingsu, which was the capital of the Shang Dynasty. And while archaeologists have uncovered a ton of awesome stuff there, including what is arguably the world's first true city, they haven't been able to decipher the script used on many of their artifacts. Some of these artifacts are made of bronze, like this huge cauldron that was found in a collapsed Shang Dynasty palace. Bronze was reserved for ritual vessels that were used in religious ceremonies. This cauldron in particular probably had something to do with ancestral worship, a very common theme in bronze inscriptions. Ancestral worship literally means worshipping your ancestors. And for the Shang, this meant honoring the kings who came before them. In fact, many of these bronze inscriptions were created to commemorate an event from the king's life or to celebrate his accomplishments. But as time went on, these inscriptions became more elaborate, moving from simple records of events to artistic depictions of those events. They were no longer just written words, but a true art form. However, creating these works of art required a huge amount of manpower and resources, which limited who could commission them. You weren't likely to see your name immortalized in bronze unless you were a king, a member of the royal court, or some other high-ranking official. That's why many bronze inscriptions have survived to this day. They were never buried with people of lower status. So common folk largely went without any kind of written record. That brings us back to the oracular bones. Unlike bronze, which was expensive and difficult to work with, bone was cheap and easy to carve. So instead of reserving inscriptions for the elite, they were now available to anyone who could afford a bone and a skilled scribe. Oracle bones became a sort of ancient diary, recording every mundane aspect of the daily life: births, deaths, marriages, harvests, even dreams. But they were still used for important events as well, such as dedicating a new temple or commissioning a bronze vessel. So once Shang Dynasty script began replacing bone inscriptions around 1300 BC, the most important events of people's lives were recorded in both bone and bronze. But while bronze inscriptions were reserved for the elite, bone inscriptions remained popular among the common folk. They even continued to be used during the Zhou Dynasty, well into the 8th century BC, which helps explain why they were so poorly understood. The Shang and Zhou dynasties were separated by a massive gap in time, and during the 1,000 years between these two scripts, evolved drastically. This isn't exactly surprising when you look at how much English has changed in just the last 100 years. So to think that Shang Dynasty script remained exactly the same from 1300 BC to 800 BC is pretty unrealistic. And yet that's exactly what scholars believed until recently. They assumed that Shang Dynasty script stopped evolving. After the Shang were overthrown in 1046 BC, which meant that these later Zhou Dynasty bone inscriptions must have been written in a completely different script. And since they couldn't read this script, they assumed that it was a forgery. But as it turns out, this is just another example of humans not understanding things that are outside of their own experience. When archaeologists first discovered these bones, they didn't understand the context. All they saw were these strange markings and assumed that they were just some random dude trying to copy ancient Chinese script. But as we now know, these inscriptions were created in a completely different system. And that system continued to evolve throughout the Zhou Dynasty. So what does this mean for our understanding of early Chinese culture? Well, it means that we have a much broader source of information to draw from. We can now compare and contrast the language of these inscriptions with that of Shang Dynasty script to better understand how each evolved, and what cultural factors may have caused those changes. We also have a much better understanding of the scope of literacy during the Zhou Dynasty. Up until now, we assumed that writing was limited to the elite class, but now we know that there was a much broader audience for written works. Now granted, these inscriptions were still primarily written on bone, so they were still largely a tool of the upper class. But they were much more accessible than bronze. Another interesting observation is that these two scripts seem to have been used simultaneously for hundreds of years, raises some really interesting questions. For example, why did people continue to use bone inscriptions when Shang Dynasty script was clearly becoming dominant? Was it simply cheaper and easier to use bone? Or was there some sort of cultural value associated with it? If so, what was that value? Unfortunately, these questions are impossible to answer at the moment. But as more archaeological sites are uncovered and analyzed, we hope to find more clues. Ultimately, the discovery that bone inscriptions continued to be used throughout the Zhou Dynasty is a testament to the adaptability and sophistication of early Chinese culture. In a world where empires often collapse and new kingdoms take over, it's not uncommon for previous technologies and knowledge to be abandoned or forgotten. But in China, this did not happen. Instead, Shang Dynasty script and bone inscriptions coexisted with Zhou Dynasty script for hundreds of years, and that's pretty dang cool. Speaking of new discoveries, the world of archaeology is constantly changing. The ancient Chinese kept meticulous written records on tortoise shells and animal bones called oracle bones. They would inscribe questions on them, then burn them in order to get an answer from their gods. These records include major events, wars, and other aspects of the royals' lives. But did you know that some of them record more mundane details of daily life? While many of the inscriptions were epic in scale, focusing on significant events, battles, and royal matters, there was a plethora of others that captured the ordinary details of life. Let's take a journey back in time and explore these fascinating bone inscriptions together. You'll be amazed at what they reveal about daily life over 3,000 years ago. These pieces of information might seem insignificant, but they are actually crucial in helping us understand what daily life was like during this period. These inscriptions offer an intimate view of people's everyday lives, revealing their hopes, fears, and concerns. Now let us delve into some of these intriguing inscriptions and see what they can teach us about daily life in ancient China. Let's start with one that has captured the imagination of many. It tells the story of a king's wife who had a toothache. Imagine being the king and your wife is in pain. What would you do? Oh, in those days, they turned to the gods for help. The inscription reads, "The king's wife suffers from tooth pain. Ask the seer to use divination to determine the cause." This small detail from a bone shard gives us an insight into a few interesting aspects of their society. For one, it reveals that even royalty was not exempt from everyday problems like toothaches. Kings and queens were seen as semi-divine in ancient China, so it's intriguing to think that the queen would need assistance in dealing with a simple toothache. The fact that they turned to divination shows their belief in the supernatural. In ancient China, people believed that everything was interconnected, and that even mundane events like a toothache could be influenced by supernatural forces. The presence of a seer in the court indicates that these beliefs were not just part of the common focus culture, but were also accepted among the royalty. Overall, this small inscription provides a glimpse into the human side of kings and queens and the role that religion played in their lives. It reminds us that despite their power and privilege, they were still subject to the whims of fate, and that they sought help in the same way that ordinary people did. Another inscription on a bone fragment talks about the weather and its impact on farming, Imagine living in a time when predicting the weather was crucial for survival. This inscription from the Shang Dynasty offers valuable insights into the importance of agriculture in ancient Chinese society. The question posed on the bone was, when will the rain stop? This simple query reveals much about the daily life of the people at that time. Agriculture was the backbone of their economy, and without predictable weather patterns, farming was a risky endeavor. Heavy rains could wash away crops and lead to famine, while insufficient rainfall could result in a poor harvest. The inscription suggests that the people were closely observing the weather and trying to understand its patterns. They wanted to know when the rainy season would end, so they could plan for planting and harvesting. It also reflects their dependence on natural processes and their lack of control over the environment. At that time, they couldn't rely on modern technology to predict the weather, so they turned to observation and divination to guide them. This inscription serves as a reminder of the challenges faced by our ancestors and the importance of understanding our environment in order to thrive. It's a simple, yet powerful testament to the ingenuity and resilience of early humans in the face of nature's unpredictability. Now let's talk about something we all dread: sacrifices, especially when they don't go as planned. This particular inscription is rather unfortunate as it describes a failed attempt to appease the gods. It says the victim escaped before the sacrifice was completed. Can you imagine the surprise and disappointment when the main part of the ritual was supposed to be eaten? What would you do in this situation? This inscription offers a glimpse into a significant aspect of ancient Chinese culture, the practice of making offerings and sacrifices to the gods. In ancient China, sacrifices were an integral part of religious rituals and were believed to be necessary to maintain harmony with the gods and ensure their favor. The Chinese believed that the gods were all-powerful and that they needed to be appeased in order to prevent natural disasters and other misfortunes. As a result, sacrifices were made on a regular basis to honor the gods and to ask for their blessings. The failure of a sacrifice was seen as a bad omen and could have serious consequences. If the gods were angered by the failure, they might bring about natural disasters, illness, or other forms of misfortune upon the people. In this particular case, the victim escaping before the sacrifice was completed was seen as a sign of the gods' displeasure. The diviners would have been eager to determine the reason for the failure and to make amends with the gods. This inscription therefore provides a rare glimpse into the rituals and beliefs of ancient Chinese society and the importance of maintaining harmony with the gods. Another interesting inscription talks about a young man named Fu Hao and his dedication to divination. It says, "Ask the diviner Fu Hao about his skills in reading tortoise shells." This small detail offers a unique insight into the role of divination in ancient Chinese society. Divination was a highly respected profession in ancient China, and those who practiced it were believed to have special powers to communicate with the gods and predict the future. Fu Hao's dedication to the craft is evident in his choice to carve the question onto a turtle shell, demonstrating his commitment to seeking knowledge and understanding. This inscription also reveals the importance of expertise and skill in ancient Chinese culture. The people who practiced divination were highly valued members of society and were often called upon to advise rulers and make important decisions. Fu Hao's reputation as a skilled diviner was likely what prompted the person asking the question to seek him out. The inscription therefore offers a glimpse into the value placed on knowledge and expertise in ancient Chinese society. It also highlights the importance of divination in their culture and the respect paid to those who practice this art. Let's turn our attention to a different topic now, one that's close to all of our hearts: food. An inscription on one of the bones talks about the preparation of a specific dish called cooked lamb from the reeds. Can you imagine a juicy lamb dish cooked in a way that preserves its taste and texture? This unusual cooking method might sound strange to us today, but in ancient times, it was a way to honor the gods and show respect during important ceremonies. This inscription reveals much about the importance of food in ancient Chinese culture. Food was not just a means of sustenance, but was also an important part of religious rituals and ceremonies. The preparation of the cooked lamb from the reeds shows the care and attention that went into creating offerings for the gods. Now, the process of wrapping the meat in reeds and cooking it slowly over a fire was a deliberate attempt to preserve the taste and texture of the lamb, ensuring that it would be presented to the gods in the best possible condition. This inscription also offers a glimpse into the culinary practices of ancient China. The idea of cooking meat in a broth made from the inner part of reeds may seem bizarre to us today, but it was a common technique used in those times. The resulting dish was not only visually appealing, but was also believed to have a unique flavor and texture that was pleasing to the gods. Overall, this inscription provides a fascinating look into the world of ancient Chinese cuisine and the importance of food in their religious practices. It reminds us of the creativity and ingenuity of our ancestors, and the lengths they went to in order to honor their beliefs. What did you find most interesting about these inscriptions? Did they change your perspective on daily life in ancient China? We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to stay informed about our latest videos. The Shang Dynasty, known as one of the most significant periods in ancient China's history, lasted from 1600 to 1046 BCE. It marked a turning point where the earlier long-standing Shang Dynasty gave way to the opulent and influential rule of the Shang. This era saw significant advancements in art, culture, technology, economy, and politics. Trade flourished, new tools were developed, and cities grew, shaping the course of Chinese civilization. However, like all great empires, the Shang Dynasty eventually fell. Their downfall was not a sudden event, but a slow decline that the dynasty's rulers tried to navigate with the help of divination practices. This is where the oracle bones come in. These bones hold a unique place in history, as they are physical manifestations of an empire's rise and fall. As we dig deeper into these remnants of the past, we uncover not just the story of a lost civilization, but also a universal tale of triumph and tragedy. But there's a darker side to these bones, one that serves as a warning for future generations. While the oracle bones often recorded the triumphs of the Shang Dynasty, they also contained signs of its decline. Some inscriptions foreshadowed disasters, others hinted at struggles within the royal family. Some even referred to upcoming rebellions. In some cases, these cracks were not only predictions of victory, they were also warnings of defeat. The bones were not simply divine guides, they were also cautionary tales. The downfall of the Shang Dynasty was foretold in many of these inscriptions, making them not just historical records, but also prophecies. The stories in the oracular bones are not only about success, they are about the inevitable fall. Writing, in this sense, became both a tool for remembrance and a reminder of mortality. The history written in these bones did not end in glory. It ended in a lesson about the fragility of power and the impermanence of dynasties. One of the ways the Shang kings attempted to influence their future was through divination, a practice rooted in understanding patterns and omens in nature. Divination, a common practice in ancient civilizations, involves seeking knowledge about the future or hidden information through various means. During the Shang Dynasty, the method of choice was osteomancy, the art of reading the future from animal bones, specifically turtle shells and occasionally the shoulder bones of oxen. This practice was deeply embedded in their religious beliefs. They believed that these bones, when carefully examined, could reveal the will of the gods, offering guidance on matters ranging from the success of a hunt to the outcome of battles. These diviners would make incisions on the bones and then heat them. And based on how the fat cracked and the bones broke, they would interpret messages from the gods. It was a complex system that relied on trained readers and a deep knowledge of the symbolic meanings attributed to different patterns. The process began with a question posed to the spirits, usually related to a concern or a decision that the king needed help with. For example, the Shang kings might ask about an upcoming battle, the health of a family member, or the favor of the gods in a particular endeavor. Once the question was formulated, it was inscribed on the shell or bone. The preparations for the divination ceremony were as important as the reading itself. A fire pit was dug, an altar was constructed, and offerings, often including pigs and other valuable items, were placed upon it. Incense and burnt offerings of grain, jade, and bronze were also common. The Shang kings took these readings very seriously, considering them crucial in making important decisions that affected the dynasty. The fate of battles, the choice of a successor, and the planning of major projects were all influenced by the oracular pronouncements. This practice ensured that the gods were not only acknowledged, but actively involved in every facet of the kingdom's affairs. As the centuries passed and the Shang Dynasty reached its zenith, the frequency of negative prophecies increased. The bones began to whisper not just of victories and prosperous reigns, but also of looming defeats, internal strife, and a dynasty on the brink. These ominous messages were not mere predictions. They were signals of an empire on the edge of collapse. And the Shang kings, desperate to stave off their prophesied fate, clung to these bones for guidance. Let's take a closer look at some of these forebodings. One recurring theme among the later inscriptions is the prediction of natural disasters. Many of the bones bear witness to droughts, floods, and other calamities that ravaged the land. These weren't just random events, but harbingers of a larger upheaval, a warning that the foundations of the dynasty were shaking. Some inscriptions spoke of civil unrest, of rival factions within the royal family vying for power. These internal squabbles were seen as particularly alarming as they threatened the very unity of the dynasty. Others mentioned rebellions, invasions, and battles that hinted at the waning strength of the Shang. Each inscription was like a piece of a puzzle, and when put together, they painted a grim picture of a kingdom on the verge of collapse. Imagine being in the Shang king's position, each year consulting these bones for guidance, hoping for good news, yet receiving prophecies of doom. Year after year, the messages grow more dire, outlining a future that no ruler wants to accept. The weight of an empire's fate rests on your shoulders, and you're being warned that it might all come crashing down. What would you do? Would you heed the warnings, or would you try to ignore them, hoping against hope that somehow things will turn out fine? These ominous predictions were not just about the future. They also served as reminders of the limitations of power. No matter how strong or wealthy a dynasty was, these inscriptions seemed to say it could fall. They offered a stark reminder that nothing, not even an empire, was permanent. This realization inevitably led to a sense of urgency. The kings, driven by fear and a desire to preserve their dynasty, might have felt compelled to act quickly on the advice given in the positive readings, hoping to amplify those favorable omens. On the other hand, they might have found themselves paralyzed by the sheer number of negative prophecies, unsure of what steps to take or whether any action would be effective. It's important to remember that these inscriptions weren't written in a vacuum. The Shang Dynasty was a real living entity, with tangible challenges and threats. The oracles didn't just predict disasters, they coincided with real-world problems like economic downturns, famines, and rebellions. This meant that the Shang kings couldn't just dismiss the negative readings as superstition. They had to contend with the possibility that the very foundations of their rule were indeed crumbling. The task of deciphering these messages was not easy. The language used in the inscriptions was cryptic and often metaphorical, leaving room for multiple interpretations. A crack that looked like a certain symbol could mean many things depending on how it was read. This ambiguity allowed for both hope and despair. If a reading was positive, it could bolster the king's resolve and inspire confidence in his rule. But if it was negative, the same vagueness could offer a way out. Perhaps the omen wasn't so clear after all, or perhaps it could be averted if the right measures were taken. In essence, these inscriptions offer a rare glimpse into the mindset of rulers facing the twilight of their dynasty. It's a testament to the human condition, our tendency to seek answers in times of crisis, even if those answers lead us to the harsh reality of our fate. As we continue to explore these ancient bones, we're not just learning about the Shang Dynasty, we're also reflecting on the universality of human experience. The hopes, fears, and struggles that have shaped civilizations throughout history. The Shang Dynasty is a case study in the complexities of power, the allure of fortune-telling, and the inevitability of change. The story isn't just about their rise, it's about their fall, a fall that was foretold, a fall that was inevitable, but a fall that continues to resonate with us today. This is because the story of the Shang Dynasty and their use of oracle bones offers a timeless lesson about the relationship between humans and the future. It was a time when emperors grappled with the mysteries of fate and the allure of knowing what lies ahead. It was a time when the line between hope and despair was often blurred, much like the cracks in these ancient bones. The oracular bones of the Shang Dynasty serve as more than just historical artifacts. They are a window into the soul of a civilization grappling with its destiny. They are a reminder that no matter how glorious a reign may be, the future is uncertain, and sometimes even the wisest of rulers cannot escape the whispers of fate. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and joining our journey through time. The world's oldest known book is a set of 13,000 pieces of tortoiseshell and animal bone, inscribed with ancient Chinese characters dating back over 3,000 years. It is without a doubt one of the most important historical discoveries ever found, providing the earliest known evidence of a writing system in China and giving us an unparalleled window into a forgotten world. But what's truly fascinating about the oracular bones isn't just their historical significance or their ability to preserve ancient history. It's something much deeper and more profound. What's truly remarkable is the way they managed to preserve memory itself, literally encoding bits of information onto physical objects and then burying them deep underground. This has left experts baffled, wondering how such a sophisticated practice could have developed so early on, and what it means for our understanding of human history. But before we dive into this mystery, we need to answer a more basic question. What exactly are the oracle bones? To understand the true power of these ancient artifacts, we must first take a closer look at what they are and where they come from. The oracle bones were discovered in 1899 in the ancient city of Anyang. Located in what is now the central province of Henan, China, these bones were originally used by the Shang Dynasty as a form of divination, a way of communicating with the dead and gaining insight into the future. Back then, around 1600 BC, the Shang kings would ask questions of their ancestors, seeking guidance on everything from military strategy to agriculture to personal relationships. And the bones served as a physical manifestation of those questions, a tangible link between the living and the dead. The process of using the bones was a complex one that involved making incisions, carefully cracking and reading the resulting patterns, all while following strict religious protocols. It was a highly specialized practice that required years of training and experience to master. The diviners, often members of the royal court, would make careful incisions on the bones, usually along natural lines or cracks. They would then heat the bones over a fire until they cracked, and the resulting patterns and fractures would be interpreted as messages from the gods. Each crack was meticulously recorded and analyzed, with certain patterns corresponding to certain answers or predictions. For example, a straight crack might indicate a yes, while a jagged or broken line might suggest a no or an unknown. But here's where things get really interesting. As the diviners continued to use the bones over time, they began to add new markings and symbols, eventually developing a full-fledged writing system. What started as a simple method of divination quickly evolved into a complex system of record-keeping and communication. Over the centuries, the Shang Dynasty kept track of births, deaths, marriages, natural disasters, eclipses, agricultural cycles, and even military campaigns, all by painstakingly recording them on these fragile pieces of bone. And as they did, they created the world's first known library, a vast collection of historical records that would survive for thousands of years. In total, over 13,000 pieces of bone and tortoiseshell have been discovered, each one bearing silent witness to the rise and fall of one of the greatest empires in history. When you hold one of these bones in your hands, you're literally holding a piece of history, a tangible link to a civilization that flourished over 3,000 years ago. You can almost feel the weight of all those years pressing down on you. The countless stories and secrets encoded in the delicate cracks and crevices. It's a humbling experience that brings home the truly remarkable nature of these ancient artifacts. The discovery of the oracular bones has had a profound impact on our understanding of ancient China. Before their discovery, knowledge of the Shang Dynasty was limited to a few scattered accounts in ancient texts. But with the bones, we were able to gain a much clearer picture of this enigmatic civilization. We learned about their religious beliefs, their political structure, their economic activities, their art, their literature, and so much more. In many ways, the oracle bones are like a Rosetta Stone for ancient Chinese history. They've allowed us to decipher the language, customs, and traditions of a long-lost world. And in doing so, they've shed light on the origins of one of the world's oldest and most influential civilizations. One of the most remarkable aspects of the oracle bones is their sheer longevity. Despite their fragile appearance, these pieces of bone and tortoiseshell have managed to survive for thousands of years, offering us a glimpse into a world that otherwise might have been lost forever. How they managed to preserve for so long is something of a mystery, but it likely has to do with the fact that they were buried deep underground. When the Shang Dynasty came to an end and their capital was abandoned, the bones were likely lost to the sands of time. It's only to be rediscovered centuries later when archaeologists unearthed them in modern-day China. Their survival is truly remarkable and a testament to the enduring power of human curiosity and the written word. But here's where things get really interesting. According to some sources, the oracular bones didn't just preserve history, they actually shaped it. Some scholars believe that the very act of recording events on these bones helped to shape the course of Shang Dynasty's history. By keeping meticulous records of their activities, the Shang rulers were able to track their progress, learn from their mistakes, and make informed decisions about the future. In a sense, the bones acted as a kind of library, a place where the rulers could go to find information and guidance on a wide range of topics. This idea is supported by the fact that many of the bones discovered in Anyang contain records of important events, such as natural disasters, military campaigns, and important births and deaths. By studying these records, the Shang rulers were able to gain a better understanding of the world around them and make informed decisions accordingly. Another fascinating aspect of the oracular bones is the way they shaped the development of writing in China. As the Shang dynasty progressed, the system of markings and symbols used on the bones gradually evolved into a more sophisticated writing system. This writing system would go on to become the basis for Chinese characters still used today. In a sense, the oracle bones are like the cradle of Chinese civilization, the birthplace of a culture that would go on to influence millions of people over thousands of years. This is a truly remarkable legacy for a set of ancient artifacts. To know that these humble pieces of bone played a role in shaping one of the world's great civilizations is a humbling thought indeed. So what's the secret behind the oracular bones? How did these fragile pieces of bone and tortoiseshell manage to survive for so long? The answer likely lies in a combination of factors. First, the bones were buried deep underground, which protected them from the elements and prevented them from being lost to time. Additionally, the dry, arid climate of the region helped to preserve the bones, preventing them from rotting or decaying. Finally, the fact that the bones were made of durable materials such as bone and tortoiseshell also played a role in their longevity. These factors combined to create the perfect conditions for preservation, allowing the bones to survive for thousands of years. As we continue to study and analyze the oracular bones, we are sure to uncover even more fascinating insights into the Shang dynasty and the origins of Chinese civilization. These ancient artifacts are a treasure trove of information and a reminder of the incredible ingenuity and creativity of our ancestors. So next time you hear about the oracular bones, remember that there's more to these ancient artifacts than meets the eye. They're not just pieces of history, they're pieces of a civilization that helped shape the course of human history. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please don't hesitate to give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more amazing content. Thank you for watching, and until next time, keep learning and keep exploring the world around you. The power of writing can be seen everywhere, from the books you read to the words you speak. But have you ever stopped to think about where it all began? The oracle bones are a testament to the power of human creativity and the enduring legacy of our ancestors. They remind us that even the smallest artifacts can hold the key to unlocking the secrets of the past. And in a world where change is constant, they offer a reassuring message. The memory of our past can endure for thousands of years, if we only take the time to preserve it. Imagine it's the year 1899, and you a humble shopkeeper in China, selling all sorts of wares to the folks who come into your store. One day a customer walks in and asks for something special, some animal bones that are known locally as dragon bones because of their supposed healing properties. You oblige, heading to the back where you have a stock of these so-called dragon bones. These aren't just any bones. They remnants from the days when livestock was plentiful, and your family used every part of the animal. In those times, the bones were tooled with mysterious symbols that the old folks said were left there by dragons. The customer takes the bones, pays you the asking price, and goes on his way. For you, it's just another sale, another notch on the belt of another hard day's work. And yet you can't shake the feeling that something about this transaction is different. Something about those bones feels out of place. You ponder this for a moment, but then life gets in the way, and eventually the incident fades from your thoughts. Now imagine if that customer had been a renowned archaeologist, instead of just a bone collector. That actually happened. When famed archaeologist Wang Fuji came across these bones, he knew he had stumbled upon something truly special. These weren't just random pieces of bone. They were inscribed with ancient Chinese characters. This discovery marked a pivotal moment in history. It was like finding the Rosetta Stone of ancient China. Through these oracular bones, we unlocked the secrets of one of the world's oldest civilizations. The significance of these bones reached far beyond the dusty shelves of a shop. They became the key to deciphering ancient Chinese texts, allowing us to peer into the heart of a civilization that had flourished millennia ago. But how did these humble bones become such a monumental find? Let's rewind the clock and get to the bottom of this fascinating mystery. As we delve into the captivating tale of the oracular bones, let's embark on a journey that will take us back centuries. Picture yourself standing in front of a towering mountain range, mist swirling around your feet and the air thick with the promise of adventure. Your destination is Inchi, a city nestled in the embrace of these majestic mountains. As you explore this enchanting place, you'll discover something truly remarkable. A cave adorned with ancient inscriptions that will transport you back in time. These markings are no mere doodles. They are the earliest known examples of Chinese writing dating back over 3,000 years. They tell tales of a civilization that thrived in these parts long before the rise of emperors and vast empires. But our journey doesn't end here. Just a stone's throw away lies another cave, the Yangshao site. Here you'll encounter artifacts from around 7,000 years ago. These include exquisitely crafted stone tools that speak of a time when skilled hands shaped raw materials into objects of beauty and utility. Walking through these caves is like stepping into the footprints of our ancestors. It's a humbling experience that connects you to the very origins of human ingenuity and creativity. But as we continue our exploration, we stumble upon something even more enigmatic. It's the dragon bones, fragments of animal bones bearing strange markings. At first glance, they might seem like mere curiosities, but upon closer inspection, we uncover something truly extraordinary. These dragon bones are not just random pieces of animal remains. They are inscribed with ancient Chinese characters, serving as tangible links to the past. Each character is a brushstroke of history, allowing us to decipher the language of a bygone era. Our quest to unravel the mysteries of the oracular bones leads us to the bustling metropolis of Shanghai. Here, amidst the towering skyscrapers and vibrant streets, we discover an exhibition that will leave us in awe. The Shanghai Museum stands as a testament to China's rich cultural heritage. Stepping inside, we're greeted by an array of artifacts that tell the story of an ancient civilization. Among them are the famous Yingsu gold mask and other bronze vessels that showcase the artistic brilliance of a bygone age. These treasures are not just beautiful works of art. They are tangible links to the rituals and beliefs of a society that flourished in the Shang and Zhou dynasties. The mask, with its intricate details, seems to stare back at us, inviting us to connect with the spirits of those who came before. The bronze vessels, with their archaic designs, whisper tales of ceremonies and celebrations that echoed through the ages. Let's now dive deeper into the heart of this captivating mystery. Allow me to introduce you to the protagonist of our story, a humble shopkeeper named Wang Fuji. Living in the late Shang Dynasty, Wang Fu was an unassuming individual whose life revolved around the mundane tasks of running his modest shop. However, destiny had a peculiar way of intertwining itself in the most unexpected of places, setting in motion a chain of events that would forever alter the course of history. One fateful day, a regular customer approached Wang Fu with a unique request. He wanted to purchase some animal bones known locally as dragon bones, due to their purported medicinal properties. Intrigued by the customer's interest, Wang Fu retrieved a box containing these so-called dragon bones and presented them to his customer. Little did he know that these bones held secrets that would astound the world. As the customer examined the bones, his eyes glistened with excitement, for he was no ordinary patron. In fact, he was a renowned archaeologist and scholar named Wang Zhenan. Recognizing the significance of these bones, he immediately purchased them, unaware of the impact they would have on the course of history. Wang Zhenan's keen eye had spotted the intricate carvings on the bones. Realizing they were not mere animal remains, but rather ancient artifacts of immense historical value. With these bones, he embarked on a groundbreaking endeavor to decipher the earliest known examples of Chinese writing. His pursuit led him to the Yingsu site, an archaeological wonder that became the cornerstone of his research. At Yingsu, Wang Zhenin found further evidence of this ancient civilization, including exquisite artifacts like the Yinsu gold mask. These discoveries provided crucial context to the oracular bones, allowing him to piece together the language and culture of a bygone era. As Wang Zhenin delved deeper into his research, he uncovered the profound cultural significance of these bones. They played a vital role in the religious practices of the Shang and Zhou dynasties, serving as tools for divination and communication with the divine. The process of reading the bones involved heating them carefully to reveal cracks that were then interpreted as messages from the gods. These oracular bones became the primary means of obtaining guidance on matters of utmost importance, influencing decisions that shaped the course of ancient Chinese history. However, Wang Zhenin's work was met with skepticism and challenges from those who questioned the authenticity and significance of the bones. Undeterred, he continued his research, meticulously studying the inscriptions and comparing them with other archaeological findings. His dedication paid off when he successfully deciphered some of the characters, opening a new chapter in our understanding of ancient Chinese civilization. While researching the oracle bones, Wang Fuji came across an intriguing lead. An old scroll mentioned a connection between the oracle bones and the Yingsu site. Intrigued, he decided to visit the site, embarking on a journey filled with anticipation and uncertainty. Upon arriving at Yingsu, Wang Fuji began his exploration, hoping to uncover any traces of the oracular bones. As he ventured deeper into the ruins, he stumbled upon a series of ancient pits. According to local folklore, these pits were rumored to hold secrets from the past. Driven by his relentless curiosity, Wang Fu decided to investigate further. With the help of local villagers, Wang Fuzi carefully excavated one of the pits, revealing an array of artifacts that left him stunned. Among the finds, he discovered several pieces of pottery that bore markings similar to those found on the oracle bones. Excited by this discovery, Wang Fuzi realized that he might be on the brink of a major breakthrough. The pottery shards seemed to confirm the link between the oracle bones and Yingsu, shedding new light on the enigma that had captivated his attention. As Wang Fuji continued his exploration of Yinsu, he unearthed additional evidence that connected the oracular bones to this ancient site. The sheer volume of artifacts discovered, including bronze vessels, jade ornaments, and other inscribed bones, painted a vivid picture of a thriving civilization. Each item was a piece of a larger puzzle, slowly revealing the secrets of the oracular bones and their role in ancient Chinese society. To further unravel the mystery, Wang Fuji visited an old library in Shanghai in hopes of finding more clues. There he came across a dusty scroll that mentioned the use of oracular bones in religious rituals. This scroll provided valuable insights into the divination process and the significance of the bones in communicating with the divine. Armed with this newfound knowledge, Wang Fuji returned to Yinsu with renewed determination. He realized that the oracular bones were not merely historical artifacts, but keys to understanding a complex religious system. The markings on the bones were not just random patterns, but carefully crafted symbols that held profound meaning. With each bone he examined, Wang Fuji felt as though he were stepping into the minds of his ancestors, deciphering their beliefs and practices. As word of his discoveries spread, Wang Fuji gained recognition as a leading expert on the oracular bones. His dedication and meticulous research shed light on one of the most enigmatic aspects of ancient Chinese culture. The oracular bones went from being obscure artifacts to treasured windows into the past. The story of the oracular bones is a testament to the power of curiosity and the pursuit of knowledge. These humble pieces of animal remains have unlocked the secrets of one of the world's oldest civilizations, allowing us to connect with our ancestors and understand their way of life. So the next time you come across something that sparks your interest, remember that it may hold more than meets the eye. Brace the unknown, explore with an open mind, and you never know what fascinating discoveries await you. We hope you enjoyed this journey through time and the fascinating tale of the oracular bones. If you want to support our channel and see more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Today we're going to talk about the oracular bones of the Shang Dynasty, one of the most exciting pieces of evidence that we have for early Chinese society. Now, this is going to be a bit of a different kind of video. Usually, when we talk about artifacts, we're looking at them in isolation, seeing what we can learn from this object. about the time and place that it comes from. But the oracular bones aren't just fascinating in and of themselves, they also reveal so much about how early states used writing, not just as a way of preserving knowledge across generations, but as a tool for ruling. Now, there's been a lot written about the oracular bones, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here. If you want to learn more, please check out the bibliography below. This video is mostly going to focus on how the oracular bones reveal how the Shang Dynasty used writing. So let's get started. When we talk about the oracle bones today, we're usually talking about turtle shells and the shoulder bones of oxen. But originally, the oracle bones were any hard surface that could be inscribed, including stone, bone, tortoiseshell, and even the shoulder blades of oxen. People would inscribe questions on them, then put them in a fire or bury them in the ground. Then once they were heated up or after enough time had passed, they would crack. And then based on the cracks, diviners would try and figure out what the answer to the question was. For most of ancient China, the oracle bones were used for divination. It was until the Shang Dynasty that the oracle bones became closely associated with state rituals and were used to collect messages from the gods, which may seem a bit weird. How do you go from asking if your cow's gone, nah, have a calf, to getting divine guidance? Well, the Shang Dynasty saw the rise of a new class of professional diviners, whose job it was to consult the oracle bones on all matters of import. These people were called the Fang, or the seers, and they played a crucial role in Shang society. The Shang kings came to rely on the advice of the seers, and the seers had considerable influence over the king. In fact, we know quite a lot about the Shang Dynasty seers, thanks to the records left behind by the diviner, Yixing. The main source is a collection of 284 texts carved on oracle bones, which are known today as the Yingsu dispatches or the Yanjia dispatches. Together, these inscriptions tell us a lot about how the Shang kings ruled their people and about how the diviners interpreted their power. To understand these inscriptions, though, we need to talk a little bit about Shang writing. Like all Chinese writing, Shang writing developed from earlier Neolithic scripts like Jiahu and Longshan. However, unlike later Chinese writing, Shang writing was mostly an elite script. Although most of the symbols in Shang writing eventually evolved into the characters we use today. This wasn't a script that everyday Shang subjects would have used. Shang writing was typically carved into bronze vessels, used for communicating important information to the elites and recording important historical events. This is why most of our Shang Dynasty artifacts are either large bronze vessels or small pieces of bone or shell like the oracle bones. It's also worth noting that Shang writing is one of the earliest instances of logograms. Basically, Shang writing uses symbols to represent words instead of sounds. For example, this symbol represents the word for king. It doesn't make any particular sound, but it's meant to communicate the idea of royalty. Of course, spoken language doesn't work the same way, so these symbols would have been read aloud using phonetic characters like this one that would have sounded something like ding. Logographic writing like this is still used in Chinese today, alongside a phonetic alphabet. But Shang writing was one of the first examples of this practice. But now, let's get back to the oracle bones. As we said before, Shang Dynasty rulers came to depend on the insights of the diviners, or Fang. But it's important to note that the Shang kings weren't really asking the oracles yes or no questions like, should I start a war? Instead, they wanted to know how the gods viewed certain policies or actions that they were considering taking. And the answers they received often came in the form of vague advice, rather than explicit instructions. For example, in one dispatch, the king asks about a plan to move his capital city. The response he receives is, quote, "Success will come when the ancestral temple is made whole." Not exactly clear, but maybe the Shang kings weren't looking for clear answers. Maybe they wanted to receive ambiguous messages, because then they could mold the message to fit their own agenda. For example, the Shang Dynasty kept careful records of the droughts, floods, locust infestations, and other disasters that struck the kingdom. And they often blamed these problems on the actions of neighboring states. When this happened, the Shang kings would ask the oracular bones how they should respond to this aggression. And depending on the answer they received, they would mobilize their troops accordingly. In a sense, the Shang kings were looking for confirmation of what they already thought they knew. They already had decided that they needed to go to war, but the oracle bones gave them the mandate of heaven to do so. The diviners didn't just play a role in deciding policy, though. They were also responsible for writing down the laws and decrees that the kings issued. These were recorded on the large bronze vessels that were used to communicate with the elites. And there is a very particular style of writing that these decrees used. It's called the Yin Shan style, or the Yin Ruin style. And it's a beautiful style of writing that has survived a modern day in calligraphy. However, these inscriptions don't just record the text, they also show us how writing itself could be a tool for power. For example, some of the earliest inscriptions we have from the Shang Dynasty are from the so-called Ghost Month. This was a month when communication with the dead was thought to be easier, and the Shang kings asked the oracle bones to tell them what their ancestors thought about certain policies that they were considering. Some of the earliest inscriptions we have are from these, and they show us how the Shang kings saw themselves as the continuers of their ancestors' bloodline for the Shang kings. Their authority came directly from their ancestors, and they frequently sought their advice when making major decisions. But the oracle bones don't just reveal how the Shang kings used writing, they also reveal how the Shang kings used literacy. Remember that Shang writing was primarily an elite script, and literacy was primarily confined to the royal court and the diviners. Most Shang subjects were probably illiterate, which gave those who could read and write an enormous amount of power. For example, in one dispatch, we see that the king asks a retainer named Yu to read the bones for him. This shows that the king himself couldn't read, at least not without assistance. Literacy in the Shang Dynasty was primarily a royal and elite skill, and those who could read and write held a great deal of power. Even the oracle bones themselves were carefully curated and controlled by the Shang elites. Even though anyone could inscribe an oracle bone, the Shang kings carefully selected which questions got recorded, and only the elite could afford to have their questions answered in this way. Ultimately, the power of the oracle bones can't be separated from the power of writing itself. The oracle bones were able to give kings a sense of legitimacy. They created a paper trail for important events, and they provided a way for kings to get advice from their ancestors. But none of this would have been possible without the development of writing itself. Without writing, there would have been no way to record the messages from the gods, no way to keep track of important royal events, and no way to preserve the genealogy of the kings. As we move into the next period of Chinese history, literacy becomes increasingly widespread, and writing moves out of the realm of the elite and into the hands of everyday people. But this is a topic for another video. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please remember to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you all next week. In my last video, we discussed the discovery of the oracle bones in China, and how these early examples of Chinese writing provided valuable insight into the Shang Dynasty. However, it is crucial to remember that the oracle bones represented only the beginning of a very long journey for Chinese writing. They were not the end point, but rather the starting pistol for a race that would continue for centuries. After the Shang Dynasty, writing did not disappear. Instead, it evolved and adapted, leaving behind its primitive beginnings and growing in sophistication with each passing age. One of the ways we can track this evolution is through the physical objects that were used to record information. After the Shang Dynasty, the oracle bones were replaced by another medium, bronze inscriptions. Now, before we continue, I would like to extend a huge thanks to the museum staff at the J. Paul Getty Museum for giving me permission to use these images of the wonderful objects featured in this video. So let us take a closer look at some of these bronze inscriptions and see what insights they can provide into the culture that created them. This is a large ceremonial vessel called a zun, which was made during the Western Zhou dynasty, specifically between 1046 BC and 771 BC. The reason we know this is because there is an inscription around the body of the zun that tells us not only who the vessel was made for, but also the year it was made. This is one of the earliest examples we have of dated inscriptions. The date tells us that this vessel was made in the 13th year of King Shang's reign. So by looking up his reign in the historical records, we know exactly when it was made. Now, unlike the oracle bones, which had characters stamped into their flat surfaces, the Zunfu uses characters that are engraved onto its curved surface. This might seem like a minor detail, but it actually represents a significant advancement in the development of writing. You see, when the Shang people practiced their form of divination, they needed to make sure that the signs appeared in the right place. To do this, They would stamp the bones with the appropriate character, which could be read from the top or bottom, depending on which side the sign appeared on. But when the Shang were making inscriptions on metal, there was no need to worry about which way the text would look when flipped upside down. This freedom allowed them to start thinking about layout and aesthetics, leading to more intricate and artistic designs. For example, on the front of the vessel, there is an inscription that tells us the name of the person it was made for, Bushuja. The inscription also tells us that this vessel was made to honor his ancestors. Below that, there is an elaborate design of two dragons chasing a ball. And below that again, there is another inscription telling us that this was done in the 13th year of King Xi's reign. All of this information is packed into a relatively small space, and yet it is presented in a way that is both informative and aesthetically pleasing. But the Zongfu is not just an example of early Chinese writing. It is also a testament to the power and wealth of the Western Zhou royal family. You see, during the Shang Dynasty, bronze vessels were typically made for important members of the royal court. But it was until the Western Zhou Dynasty that bronze vessels began to be produced on a larger scale for everyday use. And because these vessels were so expensive and time-consuming to produce, they became symbols of wealth and power. In fact, the very materials used to make the Zongfu, namely the shape, size, and thickness of the vessel, along with the decorative motifs, all work together to convey a message of power and prestige. In fact, the design of the Zongfu was highly symbolic. For example, the two dragons chasing a ball represent the king's authority over the natural world. Dragons were seen as spiritual beings that controlled the weather, so having them under the king's control symbolized his power over the elements. Similarly, the vessel's large size and elaborate decorations symbolized the king's wealth and power. This was a way of showing off the king's wealth and power to other kingdoms and potential enemies, serving as a reminder of who was in charge. However, the zun was not the only type of object that had inscriptions put on it. Another type of object that was commonly inscribed was tools. And this is where things get really interesting. Because unlike the zun, which was primarily used as a symbol of wealth and power, the tools had a much more practical purpose. But that didn't stop the people from adding inscriptions to them. In fact, the inscriptions on the tools were just as important as those on the ceremonial vessels. Take this dagger, for example. On one side there is an inscription that tells us that the dagger was made for a general named Yu. And on the other side there is an inscription that tells us that the dagger was made in the 8th year of King Li's reign. These inscriptions were not just for show. They're actually an important part of the dagger's function. See, in ancient China, weapons were not just tools of war, they were also symbols of power and authority. By inscribing the dagger with the general's name, it was essentially a way of giving him a personal touch, making it clear that this was not just any dagger, but the dagger of a particular general. This was a way of giving the weapon even more power and authority, making it a symbol of the general's status and importance. What's more, the inscriptions on the tools also tell us about the craftsmanship that went into making them. Take a look at the blade itself. It is beautifully crafted and perfectly balanced. The handle is made from a single piece of jade and the scabbard is lined with silk. This was not just a weapon, it was a work of art, and the inscriptions on it tell us that the craftsman who made it was proud of his work. He wanted to show off his skills and the quality of the materials he used. We can see the same thing with this axe. On one side there is an inscription that tells us that the axe was made for a duke named Wan, and on the other side there is an inscription that tells us that the axe was made in the 2nd year of King Cheng's reign. But that's not all. There is also an inscription on the handle of the axe that tells us that the axe was made by a craftsman named Lao Ai. This is one of the few pieces of evidence we have of a craftsman's signature on an artifact from this period. It tells us a lot about the role of craftsmen in ancient Chinese society. These craftsmen were not just skilled workers, they were artists. They took pride in their work and wanted to be recognized for it. In fact, the very materials used to make the axe, namely the shape, size, and thickness of the blade, as well as the decorations on the handle, all worked together to convey a message of power and prestige. In this case, the axe was a symbol of the duke's authority over the natural world. Having an axe made from high-quality materials and expertly crafted showed that the duke was in control of the resources and manpower necessary to create such a fine weapon. This was a way of showing off the duke's wealth and power to other kingdoms and potential enemies, serving as a reminder of who was in charge. All in all, the inscriptions on the tools tell us a great deal about the culture that produced them. They show us that the ancient Chinese were not just practical and efficient, but also artistic and creative. They took pride in their work and wanted to make beautiful, high-quality objects that would last for generations. So to recap, after the Shang Dynasty, writing in China did not disappear. Instead, it evolved and grew in sophistication. Objects like the zun and axes, with their beautiful inscriptions, are a testament to this evolution.
Wow.
These objects show us that the ancient Chinese were not just practical and efficient, but also artistic and creative. They took pride in their work and wanted to make beautiful, high-quality objects that would last for generations. The inscriptions on these objects tell us not just about the culture that produced them, but also about the people who made them and the people they made them for. They are a window into the past that allow us to connect with the ancient Chinese on a personal level. Hopefully you enjoyed this video and learned something new about ancient Chinese writing. Oracle bones, a glimpse into China's Shang Dynasty past. In the late 1800s, a farmer in Shandong province accidentally unearthed a series of mysterious animal bones that turned out to be a significant part of Chinese history. Fast forward to today, and over 100,000 of these so-called oracular bones have been discovered. They offer an intimate look into the daily lives of the Shang Dynasty, one of China's earliest civilizations. But who are the Shang people? The Shang Dynasty lasted from around 1600 BCE to 1046 BCE, making it nearly 4,000 years old. During this time, the Shang controlled most of what is now northern and central China. Their capital city was located near modern-day Anyang. The Shang kept detailed records on tortoise shells and shoulder blades called oracle bones, which were used for divination. That is, they were used by priests to seek the advice of ancestors and deities on important matters. These inscriptions were made by priests who would first carve a question or a request onto the bone and then heat it over a fire until it cracked. The cracks were then interpreted as either a yes or no answer. The Shang kings consulted the oracles on all aspects of ruling, from military campaigns to agricultural planning. In fact, these bones hold the earliest known written records of agriculture in China. And we know quite a lot about the Shang thanks to these fascinating artifacts. You might think that only important events such as battles or natural disasters would be recorded on the bones. And while there are many inscriptions about these grand affairs, there are also many that record more ordinary details of everyday life. Some talk about ritual sacrifices to the gods, while others document the weather, the harvest, or even personal ailments. But why are these mundane records important? It's because they show us the human side of the Shang Dynasty. They remind us that the people who lived then were just as concerned with the small details of daily life as we are today. Let's take a closer look at some of these everyday inscriptions. First, let's consider a bone that mentions the upcoming spring planting season. This may seem like a simple detail, but it's actually quite significant. It shows that the Shang people were thinking ahead to the future and planning for the next year's harvest. Agriculture was the backbone of their society, and without a good harvest, people would go hungry. So it's not surprising that the Shang rulers would consult the oracles for guidance on when to plant and how much to plant. Another bone tells us about a royal family member's toothache. This is a very relatable problem. We've all had a toothache at some point, and we know how miserable it can make us feel. But imagine having a toothache in ancient times without any modern dentistry. The Shang royals didn't have the benefit of things like painkillers or root canals, so a toothache could be a truly agonizing experience. The inscription doesn't say what caused the toothache or how it was treated. But it's interesting to see that even the royals weren't immune to such a common ailment. It reminds us that despite their power and privilege, the Shang royals were still human beings with all the same needs and concerns as everyone else. A third bone talks about a failed sacrifice to the gods. Human relationships can be complicated, but the relationship between humans and the divine is a whole different level of complexity. The Shang believed that the gods were all-powerful and that they could control the fates of mortals, so it was very important to make the gods happy. Sacrifices were an important part of Shang religion. They were a way of showing the gods that humans were grateful for their blessings, and they were also a way of asking the gods for help in times of need. The Shang made all kinds of sacrifices, including animal sacrifices, grain sacrifices, and even human sacrifices. But as you can imagine, the gods weren't always pleased with the sacrifices that were offered to them. Sometimes the sacrifices were simply not good enough, and sometimes the humans who made the sacrifices had bad intentions. When this happened, the Shang believed that the gods would become angry and they would bring disaster down on the people. A failed sacrifice could result in anything from a bad harvest to a deadly plague. So it's understandable that the Shang rulers would be concerned about this. The inscription doesn't say what caused the sacrifice to fail or what the consequences were. But it's interesting to see that even the Shang rulers were always successful in their dealings with the gods. It reminds us that no matter how powerful we are, we're still at the mercy of forces beyond our control. While the Shang Dynasty eventually fell, the legacy of the oracle bones continues. They offer an intimate look into the daily lives of the Shang people, a civilization that thrived almost 4,000 years ago. They reveal a society much like our own, concerned with the same basic needs and desires: food, family, and the future. As we continue to unearth and decode these ancient artifacts, we gain a deeper appreciation for the rich history of China and the people who have shaped it. Now, if you're hungry for more knowledge, don't forget to subscribe. We have thousands of videos that cover everything from the tiniest details of ancient artifacts to sweeping historical narratives. There's something for everyone here. And if you want to support us, become a member. Your support allows us to keep producing, engaging, and educational content that brings history to life. Thank you for watching.